Hello, welcome to Mentoring with the Masters. My name is Jennifer Kuyrkendall. I'm the Third Circuit representative for the Young Lawyers Division Board of Governors. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with the director of the Henry Latimer Center for Professionalism, Linda Calvert Hanson. Linda, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. There seems to be a lot of attention focused on lawyers behaving unprofessionally. Can you talk to us a little bit about what types of things you're seeing?
Well, I can tell you that I've now been with the Florida Bar in my position for the past 3 years, and I can see a shift that's been happening. And during that time, what we're seeing is that professionalism was really thought of as just being aspirational. And what's really happening now is professionalism is now becoming an expectation. And I think if we look at it, big picture from a wide lens, it's easy to see some of these changes that are happening. And the first is in terms of what's happening in the case law. And when we look back at what was going on perhaps 10 years ago, we can see some unprofessional conduct described by the court. And at that point, perhaps all they were trying to do was to make a written decision so that they could share the information that they thought that conduct was unprofessional. But the lawyer perhaps only received a public reprimand at that point, and I'm thinking of the Martucci case. Then we go up about 10 years, and we're looking at the retainer cases. And so in the retainer case, the conduct happened during a videotaped deposition, and the court took a much stronger stance on the conduct, which they determined was both patently unprofessional and patently unethical. And then we move up to the most recent case, which is the Norkin case that was handed down on Halloween of 2013. And in that case, the Florida Bar had recommended a 1-year suspension of Mr. Norkin. And the Supreme Court said, no, that is insufficient. We want to double it. So they ordered a 2-year suspension of Mr. Norkin. And then in addition, they ordered him to appear before the full Florida Supreme Court for a reprimand in front of the court, which is something that is extremely rare. So in our minds, when we look at the cases, we are seeing a very clear difference in the manner in which the courts are dealing with professionalism cases. Another thing that I think signals this change is that on its own initiative, the Florida Supreme Court in September of 2011 modified the oath of admission to the bar to include the civility pledge. So that demonstrates the clear importance of all attorneys acting professionally and civilly. On a similar vein, in July of 2013, the Supreme Court passed SC 13688, which is the code for resolving unprofessionalism complaints. And in that document, they outlined the problems that they were seeing that have been evolving, and then they required that each of the 20 circuits create a local professionalism panel to handle professionalism complaints at the local level on a more informal basis. And so that's another very clear signal that we're getting from the courts about their concern about unprofessional conduct. In addition, President Coleman asked bar staff to come up with what we're calling the E-Guide, which is short for the best practices for effective electronic communication. And that document is designed to help with dealing with the angry emails, the hostile phone calls, how to use your laptop and tablet in public, some of the social media issues. And in addition to that, he's charged the Standing Committee on Professionalism with reviewing all of the ideals and the goals and the principles and the standards statewide for professionalism, and to draft a document that can be enacted on a statewide basis to cover all the new issues with professionalism. And the committee has done that. They've entitled it Professionalism Expectations, and it's currently with the Program Evaluation Committee, which is part of the Board of Governors. And it's anticipated that that document will be reviewed by the full Board of Governors for potential adoption later this spring. So you can see there have been a number of very recent initiatives that are trying to address the perceived issue of unprofessional conduct by lawyers in Florida.
Certainly. Do you really think that we have more lawyers that are actually behaving unprofessionally, or is it just more visible now?
Well, that's really an interesting question, Jennifer, and part of it is I think there have been changes. Number one, we have over 100,000 lawyers practicing law today. And for example, when I first started practicing law, it was very common to know everybody within your legal community. Well, now, just given the size of the bar and the geographic dispersion, we find that the practice of law where you knew everybody in your community, the dynamics have totally changed on that. So I think that's one of the factors. I think you're right on the visibility aspect as well, because technology has changed the practice of law so radically in the past few years. Now videotaped depositions are pretty common. It's also very common to have situations, we have courtroom recordings, and people are snapping shots of videos on their iPhones and immediately uploading them on YouTube. And so that immediacy of being able to disseminate information, and unfortunately, it's oftentimes focused on, conduct that is unprofessional or conduct that is not desirable. So the fact that we can now more visibly see it and hear about it, I think, is one of the changes that have evolved out of the technological aspects. While we do recognize that there are more visible means and we have more lawyers, I think it's really important for us to also realize that every day we have very skilled and competent lawyers who are making a difference in people's lives, and they have very favorable outcomes. But those aren't talked about. And so as a society, we tend to focus on the negative. So I think it's really important for us to always realize that, in some ways, it's really a handful of bad actors that we're talking about. And also, sometimes what's happening is it's the same actor. For example, when the Martucci case that I referenced, it was his second time through, retainer, multiple offender. And so even with Mr. Norkin. So I think part of what happens too is that for most attorneys, they never run afoul of the disciplinary system. They never have the complaints filed against them. Of those attorneys who do have a complaint filed against them, it's a learning opportunity and they don't repeat it. So that it's something that perhaps, they could really take a teaching moment and change whatever the situation was, whether it was failure to communicate with their client or whatever the allegation was. So it's more often the chronic offenders, if you will, that we seem to to put a greater focus on. So with all of those factors, it's sometimes difficult to kind of come up with a statistical analysis. Is it really more instances of unprofessional conduct, or is it in fact just a combination of factors?
Okay. Well, Linda, thank you. You've certainly provided very useful information about professionalism in the state of Florida, the importance, especially all the recent activity as deemed by the Florida Supreme Court, the oath of admission and everything. So I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.